you doing? You alright?
How are you?
Oh, I'm fucking aching. Christ. 10-mile run absolutely fucked me up today. It's been a tough one. Oh, right, okay, so we're recording this the day after we recorded our first episode for Rohan. So it's probably... So the episodes go out 2 weeks each, 2 weeks at a time. But it's interesting always doing it something like the day after. There's been a couple of episodes where we've done that, where we've recorded it really soon after another one. But then you don't hear about it for weeks at a time, which is odd. Okay, right, cool. Oh, we got drinks today. What are you drinking? This is that fucking disgusting.
I feel like it might be out of date, because I've just looked and it says...
It's fucking disgusting.
So my mum's just given us it because she's like, oh, I don't drink Pinot Grigio.
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
I don't either. But anyway, I took it. I've opened it because it's only... Well, the rest of the stuff in our house is champagne from our wedding, so... And I'm just... No. But I've just looked there and it says... from wherever region.
Yeah.
2016. So, does white wine last that long?
I have no idea. No, I'm not saying it's old, but it's endorsed by Tony Blair.
But you know how, like family members, what my family's like? Like, my gran gave me those smelling salts when I was ill.
Oh, God, yeah.
She was like, oh, I have these smelling salts. And I thought, oh, this looks a bit retro, this bottle. But I still smelled it and nearly knocked my head off. And then I looked and it was from, went out of date in the 1960s.
Do you know what's really upsetting is Harambe was still alive when that wine was in date. That's bullshit. Right, okay, let's just crack on because today I think might be a longer one because this is...
Jesus.
So I've spent the last few weeks, so it's April now, you won't hear these episodes till May, but I've spent the last 2 weeks, maybe 2.5 weeks, balls deep in horses.
Yeah, he's literally walked around dipping his balls in books.
That's it. No, I've been
slapping them together.
No, I've been really, really, really deep into the Rohan stuff. I get paper cuts on my taint. Right. So last episode, we talked about the Gondorian province of Calenarthon being gifted by Cirion the Steward to Eorl the Young of the Eorl after they came down from the north, the far north, and they helped Gondor when it seemed all was lost by an attack by the Belcorth of the east and the orcs
terrain and the geography.
We discussed the terrain, the geography, the broad general outline of where its borders are and stuff like that, and how it functioned as a Gondorian province. We also talked about the Hornburg or Helm's Deep or the Soothburg.
Mythology of the horses.
We talked about the Meras, We also talked about Dunharrow, the spooky place.
Yeah.
And we talked about we talked a little bit about Edoras and Oldburg, and we talked a little bit about Orthanc, Isengard. So we covered land and places last time, and this time we're gonna start looking at the kings because the kings provide a very good framework for obviously the events of Rohan. Now, something I want to interject super quickly is that I discovered. In the earliest drafts, the Kingdom of Rohan was actually allied with Mordor. So originally, Tolkien had the Horse Kings of Rohan allied with Mordor. And I wonder if part of that survived to the end because Sauron tried to buy horses from Rohan before they actually stole them. He tried to strike up
a bit of a relationship still.
I don't know. It's more like he tried to strike up a trade relationship. And then Grima Wormtongue was able to obviously exploit things and get a hold of all of that. But yeah, so anyway, we'll start with the history of Rohan. Can you name any of the kings of Rohan?
Rohan, Johan, Eowan.
It's not even
Padawan.
Nah, not even funny. Shit you.
What? Theoden?
Yep, Theoden, yep.
Hayden?
No? None? Okay, you got one. You got Theoden.
They've all got crazy names. It's just the language just does not go in.
Right, okay. So, as the Calenarthon became Rohan, the people of the Eorl began their migration south. And the people formerly known as the Eorl became the Rohirrim, and I'm going to refer to them as the Rohirrim from here on out.
One of them had a name that I thought was quite dwarf-like.
All right, that's interesting.
So, when you say that one,
yeah.
I'll shout.
So, with Rohan being a young kingdom, there's only been 18 kings by the end of Lord of the Rings. Each of them have their histories and stories, but some have a lot more history and story to them than others, but we're going to go through them all and see what we can talk about. And one thing that I've got to mention first is the lines of kings. So, there are 3 lines of kings in Rohan, and a line, as I mentioned briefly last episode, refers to the line of descendants.
Yeah.
So it goes from father to son, and then if there's an interruption,
goes to nephew or eldest.
Yeah, exactly. It starts
man.
a new line. So line 1 starts with Eorl and ends with Helm Hammerhand. Line 2 starts with Freyalaf Hildason, nephew of Helm, and ends with Theoden. And then line 3 starts with Eomer, and we don't know where that ends.
Okay.
Yeah? So, the kings are all buried in Barrowfield, and Barrowfield literally just means a field with a burial mound. Very simple etymology.
You see the mounds in the film as well.
You do, and exactly. So, this is the field outside Edoras, where each king has a burial mound, and the white flower, Simbelmine, grew on the west side, which is where the first line of kings are buried, and Simbelmine grew most thickly on the mound of Helm Hammerhand. And there's another place where the flower Simbelmine is noted to grow, and that is on the tomb of Elendil, which we mentioned last episode, is on the hill of Amon Anwar, where Cirion met Eorl.
Yeah,
exactly, and that's where the oath of Eorl was struck up. So to go up the main road towards Edoras, you need to pass through the burial mounds, because they're located on either side of the road. And then we get a bit of a tricky situation, because we don't know where Eomer would be buried, because there's only 2 sides of a road, and now there's 3 lines of kings. So maybe you go back to the west side and start a new line, like behind Eorl's line. I don't know.
They might just portion it up like the ones closest to the first line.
Oh yeah, and then like a gap.
Yeah,
and then okay, yeah.
That would be the most logical.
Yeah, well,
it just weirds me out that you would have your deceased on the road in.
It's their kings, though. It's the kings.
Yeah.
And it's their tombs.
I know, it just weirds me out.
Yeah. But anyway, Tolkien lists out all the kings in Lord of the Rings book for us, which is handy. So I'm going to go through them all now, and we're going to cover the first line of kings today. So Eorl to Helm is what we're going to cover today. And then next episode, which might be the last episode in the Rohan series, we're going to talk about Freyalaf to Eomer, which is lines 2 and 3. So, towards the end of Lord of the Rings, there is a court where they're all mourning Theoden's death. And it goes, "Then a minstrel and lawmaster stood up and named all the names of the lords of the Mark in their order. Eorl the young, and Brego, builder of the hall, and Aldor, brother of Baldur the hapless, and Freya, and Freyawine, and Goldwine, and Deor, and Gram, and Helm, who lay hid in Helm's Deep when the Mark was overrun, and so ended the 9 mounds of the west side, for in that time the line was broken, and after came the mounds of the east side, Freyalaf, Helm's sister's son, and Leofa, and Walder, and Folker, and Folkwine, and Fengel, and Thengel, and Theoden the latest. And when Theoden was named, Eomer drained the cup. Then Eowyn bade those that served to fill the cups, and all there assembled arose and drank to the new king, crying, Hail Eomer, king of the Mark." So we get a good rundown of all of the kings up to that point. Shall we start with Eorl?
Yeah.
I'm going to have a drink first.
You were just taking, like, you were proper, like, ooh, because I wasn't taking the piss, but that's earlier. I was saying, like, Thane.
Oh, no, you're
Brain,
right. Yeah, no, like,
Kane.
it's when it gets to, like, Folkwine, then Goldwine, and you're just like, what the fuck? Freya wine, Goldwine.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. There's one of them, though, that I think it's a pretty funny, because his name is something like the last lord or the surviving lord, and it's like,
well, you haven't survived.
How would you know? Like, well, no, it's not that. It's just like, imagine being a kid and being like, you're called Sole Survivor.
Yeah.
It's like, why? What? So, throughout the rule of Eorl the Young, who's, do you remember his dad? That fella off.
Yes.
The fella off. So that's why he's called Eorl the Young.
Because he was like 16 or something.
Aye, that's exactly it. So throughout the rule of Eorl the Young and on into the rule of his son Brego, the Eortheod came south to settle into Rohan. So it's over the span of 2 kings that they all started to come south. And I've mentioned this last episode, but the first capital of Rohan was the fortified town called Aldburg, and Eorl built this.
Yeah.
However, when Brego, son of Eorl, finished building the Golden Hall of Meduseld, the capital then became Edoras, and we know this, but it's just for the sake of people tuning into this episode. The rule of Aldburg, when the capital moved, the rule of Aldburg passed to Brego's third son, Eofor. And this is from whom Eomer is said to be descended. So Eomer's dad, Eomund, claims to be descended from Eofor.
Okay.
And they all stick around Aldburg because Eomer's Theoden's nephew, remember? So,
yeah, I can totally remember that.
Right. So Eomer, the guy who becomes king at the end of Lord of the Rings when Theoden dies,
yeah,
his dad claims descendant from this guy,
okay.
Eofor. And it was Theoden's sister who was Eomer's mum.
Okay.
Okay? Right. So in later years, Aldburg became the home of the third Marshal of the Mark, which is the third highest military title in Rohan. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the titles now for when we go into it. So the duties for the second and third Marshal of the Mark, their duties were assigned as needed during times of war. Like they did what was needed. And together, the first Marshal, second Marshal, and the third Marshal, as military ranks, controlled all of the Rohan's military and could gather them for war. The first Marshal, though, always had the same responsibility, and that was to command the muster of Edoras and the surrounding lands, which includes Harrowdale. Like, they were responsible for defending the lands and getting them ready for war when they needed to.
Yeah.
The second Marshal was responsible for the Westmark, like the west side of Rohan and Helm's Deep and what have you. And the third Marshal was stationed at Aldburg and responsible for the east side. So Theoden, it's interesting because a king didn't always have to be the first Marshal. They would appoint others to be that, but because Theoden was younger and still was a military man, when he was
wanted
younger,
to do it.
he was the first Marshal.
Okay.
But then when Wormtongue got his hooks into him, there was no first Marshal appointed because Wormtongue wanted to cause
as much chaos as he could.
Exactly, yeah. So that's why there's no first Marshal during the time of Lord of the Rings, and technically it was still Theoden, but it was a power vacuum, right? And the second Marshal was based at Helm's Deep, and just before and just at the start of the War of the Ring, Theoden has a son, which is in the films, like he dies in the films, and his son's called Theodred, and he was the second Marshal, and so it's the second most senior military person. After Theodred died, in the books there's a rider called Helm, who basically fills in for him and becomes the second Marshal of the Mark, but it's never officially said. And then the third Marshal was based in Aldburg, and during the War of the Ring, this title was held by Eomer because his family is all from there, right? But then shenanigans by Wormtongue got him arrested and stripped of his title and what have you. But after the War of the Ring, when Eomer became king, he changed how it all worked. And instead, you had the king, then you had the Marshal of the East Mark and the Marshal of the West Mark.
Makes sense.
That was it. And that was...
No frills.
East Mark was held by Elfhelm, and West Mark was held by a guy who's not in the books, but should be, called Erkenbrand. So Aldburg is still very important, is basically what I'm getting at.
Is he related to Russell Brand?
Exactly, yeah. Same hair. Same hair, yeah. So Aldburg's still important, but Edoras is basically where it's at, and Aldburg is Old English for Old Fortress. Again, I'm just covering stuff that we went over yesterday. Last episode, sorry. So, war, though, so we're talking about the Kings of Rohan. They are a people that have always, most of their history have been at war. The Dunlendings that we discussed yesterday, they would always
sneakies.
Oh yeah, they'd always be in and out of the stories. And we'll see during the reign of Helm Hammerhand that some of the Lords of Rohan were even descended from Dunlendings. Like, so they're always there. They're always there. They're always a threat. They're always a threat, and they're always mixed into stuff. So Eorl would rule his people. First, he ruled as the Lord of the Eortheod, and then as the King of Rohan, because he led his people before Rohan was founded. All in all, he served for 44 years, and eventually he would die fighting Easterlings within the borders, and Brego would take over. And Brego being, he's the namesake of Aragorn's horse in the films, but it's also famous for the story I told last episode. Do you know of him and his son going to Dunharrow and finding that man who tells them about the past of the dead? Very sad. So, King Brego would rule for 35 years and spend most of it defending his borders. It's a new country, right? People are going to try shit. It's brand new. But it's basically, their enemies are mainly always orcs, Easterlings, and Dunlendings. That's Rohan's lot in life. And eventually, he dies of grief the year after his son goes missing in the Past of the Dead. And Aragorn, Gimli, and Legolas, I think, do find Baldur's body in Lord of the Rings. They find like a man clad in gold armour with a notched sword. Which is pretty sad.
So you are confirming that there are other dead down there. It's just usually dead who've trod that path. It's not like where a certain type of dead go.
No. So it's called the Past of the Dead because that army is an army of goats. Now that the ghosts, they hid.
Sorry.
Army of goats.
An army of goats.
No, they hid in the mountains and then they all died. But
Anyone seen the new Grinch?
But they couldn't find peace. But they also murdered. So none but the King of Gondor could command them because they made the oath to Isildur, and none but the heir of Isildur could command them.
Okay.
And anyone who tried would die. Baldur was no exception.
Right. So there's that army, and then whoever ventures down.
Yeah.
Okay, I get you.
So Aldor becomes king because his brother's the oldest, but he's dead. He's gone. He's missing. Aldor is known as Aldor the Old because he lives to be 101 years old and rules for 75 of those. So that's pretty cool. And during his reign, things are fairly good.
Bet he looked banging for his age.
Oh, yeah. He looked like Larry Lamb.
I've recently seen a 101-year-old and
they
they look better than me.
Work?
Yeah.
Oh, fuck me. All right, fair enough. Becca's
103, actually.
Becca's an escort who specialises in old people.
Whatever.
So, anyway, with Aldor, it was a good reign because during his time as king, the population of Rohan increased and all the enemies are subdued or defeated, which is a time of rare peace for them. And this is where...
Everyone's shagging, everyone's happy.
Yeah, but this is where Tolkien being a shit comes in because he has 3 daughters, which are never named, and they're all older than his son. But his son Freya, Freya, comes to power and rules for 14 years.
The women just disappear.
Yeah, apparently. But Freya only rules for 14 years because his dad was so old that by the time Freya gets to the throne,
he's ancient, like Charles.
Yeah, exactly. He's 75. And it said his rule's peaceful, but there's not much else said about that. So then Freya has a son called Freowyne, who rules for 21 years, but is also old. That's why he's only ruled for 21 years. And so far, though, it's a good time for Rohan because starting with Aldor, now to his grandson, there's just over 100 years of peace so far. Then we get Goldwyn, his son, who's also old, and reigns peacefully for 19 years. Then we get to Goldwyn's son, Deor, and this is where things start to kick off again. Deor means bold or brave, and he's 55 when he comes to the throne.
Oh, young. He's a young buck.
Relatively fucking spring chicken for these old cunts. So the Dunlendings make an appearance, and they start raiding the horses.
He's going through his midlife crisis.
Yeah. So this is where the Dunlendings start to steal horses.
Yeah.
And they come over the River Isen and pursue, and he pursues them. So Deor takes men and pursues the Dunlendings. But this is where it's discovered that the Dunlendings are now holed up in Isengard, and they can't be removed. Because, remember, it's an ancient Gondorian fortress. It's an ancient Gondorian fortress that's pretty much unassailable. And they ask Gondor for help, but the ruling steward at the time, Egalmoth, can't send any help. So all Deor could do is all he does is put a strong force of riders in the north just to watch the borders in case they try something. His reign comes to an end after 19 years, and his son Gram takes over. Which is, I think Gram is the 8th king by this point. Graham's 23-year reign is mainly defined by warfare with those bastard Dunlendings. That's pretty much like all of it. But this is where we're going to move on to the chunk of the episode now. Because Graham's son is Helm.
Ooh.
Now, there's a film coming out later this year, allegedly. An anime film called the War of the Rohirrim. And it's all about this story. So if you're wondering what War of the Rohirrim is going to be about, it's about this. And Miranda Otto, who plays Eowyn, she's reprised her role as Eowyn as like the narrator to tell the story of everything that happens. So Helm is a very famous king, and he's called Hammerhand for we don't exactly know why, but I've got a very good guess. He takes the throne in the year 2741 of the Third Age. Helm is 50 when he comes to the throne, and he rules for 18 years. But boy, oh boy, does a lot happen in those 18 years. So one of Helm's lords is called Freka. He's a very rich lord, and he has a lot of land in Rohan. He claims to be descended from King Freyawain. However, he's also believed to have mixed blood with Dunlendings in his bloodline. Freka was called to council by Helm in the year 2754, so about 13 years into Helm's reign. And he hadn't been shown up to a lot of council, so eventually the king summons him and says, you need to attend this meeting. And it seems that Freka had a lot of ambition because he uses this as a chance, and he brings a lot of armed men with him to see the king. And surprisingly, this story is actually told in the appendices of Lord of the Rings, so I can read straight from it. So, to one of these councils, Freka rode with many men, and he asked the hand of Helm's daughter for his son, Wulf. But Helm said, "You have grown big since you were last here, but it's mostly fat, I guess." And men laughed at that, for Freka was wide in the belt. Then Freka fell in a rage and reviled the king, and said this at the last: "Old kings that refuse a prophet's staff may fall on their knees." Helm answered, "Come, the marriage of your son is a trifle. Let Helm and Freka deal with it later. Meanwhile, the king and his council have matters of moment to consider." When the council was over, Helm stood up and laid his great hand on Freka's shoulder, saying, "The king does not permit brawls in his house, but men are freer outside." And he forced Freka to walk before him out from Edoras into the field. To Freka's men that came up he said, "Be off, we need no hearers. We are going to speak of a private matter alone. Go and talk to my men." And they looked and saw that the king's men and his friends were far outnumbered them, and they drew back. "Now, Dunlending," said the king, "you have only Helm to deal with, alone and unarmed. But you have said much already, and it's my turn to speak. Freka, your folly has grown with your belly. You talk of a staff. If Helm dislikes a crooked staff that is thrust upon him, he breaks it. So," with that, he smote Freka such a blow with his fist that he fell back stunned and died soon after. Helm then proclaimed Freka's son and near king the king's enemies, and they fled, for at once Helm sent many men riding to the west marches. That's pretty fucking intense for a king to punch someone to death.
He sounds quite sexy.
I thought you might say that.
You can hammer my hand.
They're called hammer hand because you hold a hammer. You wield that meat hammer.
Oh, God. Why do you have to turn everything that's sexy into not sexy?
I don't know. So 4 years after this, so things are yeah. He punches one of his lords to death.
Dundale.
Oh, no.
Back off,
bitch.
Oh,
no. That was a precursor. Things are not done yet. So 4 years later, things are going very badly. Gondor is fighting the Corsairs of Umbar, the pirates who attack from the coast, and all of Gondor's attention is focused on that because they are just harried. That means that there's no help coming to Rohan, and they needed the help because Easterlings attack from the east, naturally. And the Dunlendings come from the north, from Isengard. And it turns out that Frekka's son Wolf is leading them now. So he's took his dad's place.
And he's got some cold feelings.
Oh, yes. So Rohan is overrun. And there's a lot of people killed or enslaved to the Dunlendings. This includes Helm's son Haleth. And he dies before the doors of Meduseld. And his son, Haleth, is the last one to fall, defending the doors, as Wolf sits on the throne of Rohan and now calls himself king. So Helm himself is forced to retreat from the crossings of the River Isen, where he was fighting, and take refuge in Helm's Deep. Although at this point it's called the Soothburg, because Helm hasn't done his thing yet. Yeah. So, why is it called Helm's Deep? I've never been there. But any of the survivors of Rohan that aren't slaves, they've also fled. So, like, to Dunharrow and Helm's Deep, like, that, again, two of the defensible places that they go to. And can you believe it? Things get even fucking worse now. Like, I was reading this and I was just like, what the shit? So, there is a major event in the Third Age called the Long Winter. 5 months.
They starved out.
Oh, it's bad. So it's 5 months of terrible cold and snow from November to March of the year 2758 to the year 2759 of the Third Age. It's a bad time for pretty much everyone except Gondor. And it's just basically everyone north of the White Mountains gets fucked up. And I'm going to take a little deviation here and move away from Rohan because thousands, if not tens of thousands of hobbits die during this. And the hobbits, so they die either from cold or starvation. And the hobbits call this the Days of Darth, or Dearth, Dearth. And it's during this long winter that Gandalf actually first discovers the hobbits. And he sees the qualities that will lead him to choose, like, Bilbo and Frodo for the quests. He sees the kindness and the pity and the tenacity that hobbits have, like how they deal with everything. Like, even though they're starving, they share what they can with each other. It shows that hobbits are basically tough as fuck, but like they're not any more evil or they're not any less kind for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, quick detour to the Shire. Now we're back. So in Rohan, the Great Winter causes problems for everyone on both sides, not just the Rohirrim, but also the Dunlendings as well. So everyone starts starving, right? Rohan is covered in snow for 5 months. Like, nobody can get through. You can't do anything, right? Gondor can't send help even if they wanted to because they can't get through the snow. Everyone starves, like I mentioned. Helm is holed up in the fortress, and that, what we know as Helm's Deep. So just after Yule, like the Christmas celebration, his oldest son Haleth has already died. His younger son Hammer leads some men out on a raid in desperation against the advice of his dad. Even Helm's like, don't fucking do this. But they're like, Dad, we need to go and find some food. They go looking for food, even though they're in a siege. They're never seen again. So now...
Waste of food, really.
The line of Helm has ended.
They could have eaten each other.
Helm's got no more descendants now. Helm grows thin and emaciated, and he's scary. Like, he looks scary with grief and with hunger. But this makes him truly fearsome because now he's a man with nothing to lose. He's desperate. His people are starving in the fortress and there's no end of winter in sight. So Helm starts to do some mad shit. He dresses himself all in white. He blows the massive horn, the war horn of the fortress, and then he goes out by himself in the snow during the night into the enemy camp. And he's like an invisible terror.
Oh, and everyone thinks he's a ghost.
So he kills Dunlendings and he steals food, but he does it all unarmed. And he does it night after night after night. And Helm believes that if he wears no weapon, then no weapon will hurt him. Soon,
wrong.
Well, no, you'd be surprised. Because soon the Dunlendings become scared. And they began to tell ghost stories about Helm. And they say that if he can't find food when he comes to the camp and kills them, he'd eat humans instead. So when the horn blows, the Dunlendings now, they start to run away instead of trying to kill him. And then one night, everyone heard the horn blow, but Helm never came back. And when daylight came, they saw a figure stood on top of the Great Dyke, which is the massive earthen wall outside of the fortress. And the Dunlendings don't dare come near him. And it was Helm. Frozen stiff, stood straight up, but dead. Completely dead. But Dunlendings, even during like the War of the Ring and later, they would still tell the story that Helm's horn can still be heard blowing in the night, and Helm's ghost wanders Rohan, killing men with fear alone. Which is pretty fucking spooky. It's like
I like it.
Oh, I love it. And to me, this gives a bit more gravity to Gimli blowing the horn to rally the Rohirrim during the Two Towers.
Yeah.
That's one of my favourite stories, but it's not over yet. Helm's dead. So are his sons, right? The line of succession is ended. And Helm is the last of what we know as the first line of kings. Now, I mentioned that a lot of people fled when the Dunlendings attacked, and some of them took refuge in Dunharrow, which is the big flat land at the top of a cliff that's easy to defend, right? Of these people, they were led by Freylaf, son of Hild, who's the nephew of Helm. So his Helm's sister was called Hild. So winter broke in March and spring begins to thaw. So as soon as it did, Freylaf leads his soldiers down from Dunharrow, and he manages to surprise Wulf at Edoras, who's calling himself King of Rohan. He kills the usurper, and now Gondor is able to send help. So Gondor and Freylaf team up, and they drive the Dunlendings out, and they've got enough force now that they even managed to clear out Isengard, which previously they hadn't been able to do, but it's because they've come out with that to try and take over Rohan that they're able to take it. And Helm's laid to rest at last on the first line of kings, and on his mound the flower Simbelmine grows thickly, like it was covered in snow because it's white. So Simbelmine is a white flower, and the flower has some history, and in Middle-earth it's been referred to by names of Whelos and Alfirin. And these flowers grew on the grave of Elendil, which I mentioned. So the name means Evermind to the Rohirrim, but the Elvish names translate more like Everwhite for Ulios, or Not Dying or Never Dying for Alfirin. And it's a quasi-play on words because it's a symbolic flower, just like we lay forget-me-nots on graves. It's a flower that's a sign of remembrance, right?
Yeah.
But the plants themselves in our world are based on wood anemone or smell fox, wildflower, or European thimbleweed.
Mm-hmm.
Like the little spring flowers, right? And now there's a new line of kings, which is cool. It begins with Freylaf, and he's crowned the 10th king of Rohan, and he rules for 39 years. But at his crowning, a very important figure appears, giving gifts and heaping praise on the Rohirrim, and everyone's like, "Wait, we've got a new friend." It's Saruman. Saruman's on the scene. Back with he's
sneaky.
Yeah, it's not going to go well for them.
Don't take gifts from a stranger.
Yeah,
Don't
exactly.
take candy.
Exactly. And that's the end of the first line of kings. Like, we got through that a lot quicker than I thought we would, which is good. I'm happy with that. But for Saruman, he appears at Freylaf's coronation. He's full of praise and gifts for Rohan, and because Rohan's very weak, right, and they're much in need of friends, especially powerful friends who can guard the north. Perhaps, maybe a wizard who, would sit in this massive impenetrable fortress and help. So soon after, Saruman takes up residence in Isengard, and he was given permission by Beren, the 19th steward of Gondor. And this was because Gondor still claims Isengard as their own at this point.
Yeah.
And he, quote-unquote, lent the keys to Saruman. And Tolkien says that this is the point in history where Saruman starts to turn to evil. And I'm going to read from the quote. "In this way, Saruman began to behave as a lord of men. For at first he held Isengard as a lieutenant of the steward and warden of the tower. Lieutenant in English is lieutenant in American. But Freyolaf was as glad as Beren to have this so, and to know that Isengard was in the hands of a strong friend. A friend he long seemed, and maybe in the beginning he was one of truth. Though afterwards there was little doubt in men's minds that Saruman went to Isengard in hope to find the stone still there, the Palantir, and with the purpose of building up a power of his own. Certainly after the last White Council, 2953, his designs towards Rohan, though he hid them, were evil. He then took Isengard for his own and began to make it a place of guarded strength and fear, as though to rival the Barad-dûr. His friends and servants he drew then, from all who hated Gondor and Rohan, whether men or other creatures of more evil, there. So yeah, with the arrival of Saruman, and the beginning of the second line of kings, I think we're going to end that one there. It's actually a shorter episode than I thought, which is pretty cool. But yeah, what did you think of all that? There's a lot of shit going on, but I think Helm is the main guy there, isn't he?
Yeah, he's hammered.
Well, it's funny because
hard.
It's interesting because like
on my heart.
Oh goodness me! Can you stop pinching your nipple? It's interesting that Tolkien never says that that's why he's called Hammerhand, but it's got to be. You don't get called Hammerhand.
Nah. Yeah, like
if you don't get called Hammerhand,
you slam your hand down on someone and you kill them, and that's not the reason you're called Hammerhand. Unless he just goes around yeeting everyone with his hand before that instance, but you never find out about it.
Yeah, what if he's called Hammerhand?
People would never go near him.
What if he's called Hammerhand because like he could just slap nails into wood? Like, and that's why it's not because he can punch people.
That's his party trick.
Yeah, it's just like he gets really drunk at Edoras and he's like put a nail in that bit of wood and he just goes bap and slaps it.
Yeah.
Maybe. Oh,
doesn't sound quite right.
Nah, lot to take in though. Lot to take in. The names are crazy.
Yeah, and the mounds on the entrance. I know, like a lot of people bury their dead outside of the walls, but I don't know. It just doesn't make sense to me. You'd think they would want to protect them or look after them in some form.
Yeah.
But I suppose they're dead.
No, it's burial mounds. Like it's the ones we've seen.
I know it's burial mounds, but what I'm meaning is that it's just a bit of a strange thing to have as you're walking into a
but we've seen
city.
We've seen these burial mounds because we saw them in Scotland.
I know. That's what I'm saying, though. Like I know it's a normal practice for you to bury your dead outside of the city walls.
Yeah, I'll tell you what is interesting as well.
Like in Rome.
Is, a lot of languages Tolkien made up himself. Rohirrim, Rohani, sorry.
It's Danish.
It's just Old English. That's all it is. It's just Old English.
Yeah.
And Old English is just transposed into, it is Old English. And it represents the language of the Rohanese, just like English is used to represent the language of Westeron.
Yeah.
Rather than making up a whole new tongue like Sindarin and what have you. But I'm wondering, can we make the name fit We Didn't Start the Fire? Like all the names of the kings, do you think we could?
Yeah.
So if I don't... Eorl, Brego, Aldo... No, hang on. No, oh, fuck up. No.
Eldor.
How'd you do it? We didn't start the fire. Right. Eorl, Brego, Aldo, Freya wine, gold wine, Deo, Gram. No, I can't get the tune. Shit. In my head, it sounded better.
You need to like dun 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 dun.
Eorl Brego, Aldo, Fred. No, it's not. It's going down.
Yeah, you don't have enough syllables.
Oh,
in the
yeah,
names.
that's probably it. Yeah. Oh.
Oh.
I wonder if there's a song like Eorl Brego, Aldo, Freya wine, gold wine, Deo.
You're thinking of ABC.
Helm, Freya laugh, Leofa, Walder, Folker wine, Fengel, Thengel, Theoden, Eomer, and now we're done.
So you were thinking of ABC.
Well, it fits. Now we know the kings of Rohan. Let's go back and talk about Gram.
I think his name is the most...
Gram.
Useless name.
So he's called Graham because Tolkien absolutely loved cocaine.
I just think it's just a crap name. But he has a really cool kid, so he makes up for it.
I mean, I wouldn't describe our daughter as really cool if, like, she was like, "Oh, I'll punch someone to death."
I would.
That's not quite how civilized society works. You dick.
Our kid wouldn't take candy from Sauron.
Well, neither did any of these.
They did.
Who?
They just said, "Yeah, we'll give you Isengard." There you go.
Saruman.
No, Sauron. I meant
Saruman.
Saruman. That's who I meant.
I corrected you, and then you
Right?
doubled down.
Okay. Saruman.
Yeah, Saruman. And it's Freyalaf who does that. That's Helm's
Nephew. Right.
Christ, even I got confused there.
Yeah, there's too many names.
It is, especially...
And you read this all of the time.
Especially when, right, as well, so... Theoden's sister is called, like, Theodwyn. And then Eamon's... So, Theodwyn has a husband, Eamund. And then they have two children, Eomer and Eowyn. So Theoden and Theodwyn, Eomer and Eowyn. Eofor is the great of Eamund. It is very fucking confusing.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
It's mental. Oh, right, should we wrap it up there, do you think?
Yeah, let's play Snog, Marry, Avoid before we go.
Right, okay.
It doesn't even have to be Lord of the Rings inspired or Tolkien inspired.
Let's just start with Theoden.
Okay.
Snog, Marry, Avoid. Oh, do I have to give you three of them?
Yeah.
Oh, right, okay. Grima Wormtongue,
Mm-hmm.
Helm Hammerhand,
Mm-hmm.
Theoden.
Marry Theoden. Snog. Helm Hammerhand.
Fair enough, yeah.
And kill Wormtongue.
I'm wondering which set of your lips he's going to snog after the way you've been talking about it. Horizontal or vertical?
That's disgusting. And there's just not as many exciting Rohanese women or
No.
Rohirrim women.
No, it's bullshit.
But I think they should be called Rohanese.
No, Rohanese is the language.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
But no, you're right. Like, Eowyn is absolutely mint. But
So there you go. Eowyn and all the random women, let's call them Rohirrim 1, the woman who's cooking stew, and Rohirrim 2, the woman who was stood with child on the road as they leave. Rohan. Would you snog, marry, avoid?
You can't do it. No. I couldn't. I wouldn't want anything to do with Eowyn because
You would marry the woman who's making the stew.
Yeah, as long as it's not Eowyn stew. Yeah.
No, exactly. That's what I'm saying. You wouldn't marry Eowyn for the stew, would you?
The thing is, right, you couldn't marry Eowyn. You couldn't snog her. You couldn't do anything.
You would avoid her.
She'd just be thinking about Aragorn. Or depending on where it is, then she'd be thinking about Faramir. So you just wouldn't... Yeah, it wouldn't
And
be
I mean,
worth it.
she barely knows them. Does she?
No, it's such a shame because she is the best female character in Tolkien. And
But the film just plays her out like she's some sort of lusty teenage girl.
It's just such a shame that there's such a shortage of amazing like women characters in Tolkien. But the ones that he fully writes are proper standouts. But
Very few.
There's very few. Yeah, you could like don't get me wrong. I could list a handful like Galadriel, Eowyn, Idril, Elwing. Like there's loads of like cool female characters, but they're all standouts because there's so few of them. Like he writes amazing women as an exception rather than the rule.
Yeah.
Although Erendis of Eldarion and Erendis, she's a bastard, but so's her husband. So Anyway, we're rambling. Hope you've enjoyed the episode, and the next one will be about the second and third lines of Kings. Well, we'll wrap up our history of Rohan. So, if you got anything you want to say, Becca, anything you want to talk about?
No, I just can't get Hammer Hand out of my mind.
Right, okay, right. I'm going to say goodbye. So, bye from me, Chris.
Goodbye from Rebecca.
Bye.
Bye.